Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today on the program Healthy Living. I'm at Desuwa Sawage. 19 June was a day set aside to do something very special for those who have special need. We want to call them special children, talking about sickle cell. A lot of us see them and say, hey, sickler, 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 and some even stigmatize them, regardless of the fact that it is not their fault. Why do we have sufferers of sickle cell? Why do we have sickle cell? Because if you go to some countries, there is nothing absolutely like sickle cell, but it seems like it's a third world problem. And honestly, it is a public health issue, whether you want to take it or not. Why would two persons come together and decide that they want to make babies when they know that definitely when they do this, they might give birth to children that will suffer sickle cell? You don't want to see these children suffer. You don't want to go to the hospital to see them. And so today we have decided that we must bring this to the front burner again. We've been doing it year to year, and this year will not be a different kettle at all. We want to talk about this. Even as we speak, some persons are preparing to get married without even knowing if they are compatible enough to so do. So joining me in the studio to talk about this, seated beside me is Dr. Adeyemi Olufemi. Is a consultant hematologist from Edo Specialist Hospital, and of course a lecturer at Edo State University, Zaire. It's a pleasure to have you join us today, and thank you for finding time to be with us.
Thank you for having me, madam.
Okay, I have Mr. Iyama Eige, an assistant director, medical laboratory scientist, and of course he does quite a number of things. Maybe he's going to be telling us all of that. The title is so much. He's not the first comer on the program. He's been with us all these years, and he's been very, very nice to us on the program. Happy to have you join us today.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you. So here we are again today to talk about sickle cell. Now, let me start with Dr. Adeyemi. Sickle cell. A lot of persons just see it as sickler, sickler, sickler. Now, when we talk about sickle cell anemia, what exactly are we looking at?
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to this program. Today is recognized worldwide, yesterday, June 19, as World Sickle Cell Day. It's actually a day to enlighten the public about what sickle cell disease is all about. Well, simply as a definition, sickle cell disease is more of a genetic inheritance of an abnormal hemoglobin S. The red blood cells in our blood has this protein known as hemoglobin, and hemoglobin actually forms a constituent of, it gives the red cell the opportunity to be able to move oxygen from one part of the body to another. So what happens here in sickle cell disease, there is a genetic inheritance, a change in this hemoglobin that gives this red cell the tendency to form sickle. And so individuals that have this condition tend to have their red blood cells easily forming a sickle-shaped kind of cell. And the problem with this kind of red cell is that they can block blood vessels and prevent the easy flowing of blood in those regions. And some of the manifestations of this condition is that these persons tend to have recurrent bone pains, or they tend to have chronic pains, and they can also have other complications like affecting all systems of the body. So it's actually a very fatal disease as defined by the World Health Organization. Okay,
Mr. Hikil, we just heard from Dr. Olufemi. He said it's a chronic disease, but some persons don't seem to take it serious. They don't. So as a specialist in that field, can you please help us tell people outside the dangers of getting married to somebody that you're not compatible with when it comes to this issue?
Okay, thank you very much. Talking about sickle cell disease, like he has explained, it has lots of complications and far-reaching consequences. If partners come together who are intending to get married, I think one of the basic things which is compulsory in these days is for them to have a HB electrophoresis, HB genotype check to know what their genotype is. And there are cases we've seen whereby this person has a sickle cell trait, which is what we normally call the AS.
The AS.
The other partner has the same AS, and they are advised not to go ahead with such an arrangement. But in our African society, people will tell you, I have faith, I believe it will not happen.
We fit everything.
Yeah, but yes and no. Yes, in the sense that nature has a way of determining what the genotype of the offspring will be. It's very possible the first child could be an AA. Okay. It's very possible the first child could be an AS. But there's a possibility of the first child becoming an SS, which we call SICKLE in normal parlance. Is there a possibility of the second child also becoming an SS? So this has to do with natural selection. Since it's nothing we can determine, what we can determine is our choices not to go ahead with that. But what happens after you've made that decision to go ahead with the union is something that nature does as natural selection. And there's a possibility of all the offspring becoming sicklers. There's a possibility of none of them becoming sicklers. But in the event that becomes sicklers, you see that there are multiple challenges. What becomes love at first sight, the love over time becomes sour, because obviously there are social issues, there are family issues, there are financial issues, because it's quite capital intensive taking care of such sufferers, such children, especially when they are very young. And there are social issues as well. A child who can go to school normally, who can engage with his peers normally, is going to affect him psychologically and socially. And it's going to affect even the family, because taking care, maybe he or she has other siblings, but he or she is just going down every time at different times in period, breaking down, and it's going to affect the child, affect relationship with others as well. So the best thing, I think, is prevention. Fine, there's management, there's treatment now, but I think there's wisdom in preventing such, causing such trauma to the person involved who becomes a sickler, and then his immediate environment and family.
That's a huge one. Okay, we hear that there's a process couple can go through. You know, once the wife is pregnant, they have this process they go through to determine whether that baby in the womb will be AS or whatever genotype that child is going to come out with. Dr. Femi, is it true?
Okay, well,
and how easily accessible is that if it's true?
Yes, well, it's not a new thing. It's not a new technique. It's been on for several years now.
Okay.
It's actually known as prenatal diagnosis of sickle cell disease.
Do we have it in Nigeria?
Well, very few centers have. I think somewhere in Lagos. I'm not sure of Abuja, but I know in Lagos there are centers, private firms who run such tests. The good thing about it is that when a couple has, let's say, a couple who are both AS, like he tried to explain earlier on, and they want to determine if the fetus has sickle cell disease or any other type, what happens is that they can go for this test. It can be done as early as 16 weeks of pregnancy. Okay. And the problem with this test is that it's an invasive procedure, because they will have to introduce special needles into the woman's womb to gain access to the umbilical cord, let me use it that way, where they can obtain blood from the growing fetus, and they can now do some DNA test and determine the child's genotype or phenotype, ideally. And that comes with its own complications. With that test, you could have threatened abortions occurring because it's an invasive technique. Okay. You could have some other problems. I think I've heard of it. I met a woman some months ago in one of my clinics. She told me she had the funds to go for it. But unfortunately, she said she was so scared of the procedure that she almost died because of the invasiveness of the technique. But at the end of the day, the child came out AS, so she was quite glad. But as at the time she came to see me, she was already pregnant again. And I was like, are you going to give it a try? She said, well, she's not going to because of her last experience. So those are some problems related to that technique. And so those are ways you can actually determine a child's genotype before they are born. And if eventually the growing fetus has sickle cell disease, you could have the choice of deciding not to continue with the pregnancy. So there are ethical issues involved there, or beliefs too. Some persons will not, especially amongst us, will not want to abort a child that's already growing. So those are some problems. But in civilized climes, those are not big issues, because the reasons why you are terminating such a pregnancy is because of therapeutic purposes. So that's one thing about prenatal diagnosis. But if we want to bring it down here, if we look at the barriers surrounding our own environment, we can also give it a try with early neonatal diagnosis of sickle cell disease. This one you are going to determine the child's genotype as early as when the child was born. So it gives such parents the opportunity to know that, okay, this child has sickle cell disease, so we really need to go headlong in this child's management to ensure that at every stages of the child's development, everything that needs to be done to keep this child healthy should be done. Not leaving it to when maybe the child is about a year old or thereabouts, and the first manifestation, maybe the child has things like swollen hands, swollen legs, and the child is crying excessively, unconsolably. That's when, or maybe the child becomes very lethargic in terms of the child becomes very weak. The blood levels have dropped significantly, and when you come to the hospital, that's when you are discovering that the child has sickle cell disease. It can actually be very traumatic for such parents. So with early diagnosis, early neonatal diagnosis, you can actually determine a child's genotype and know how to manage them in every stages of their development.
I know that everybody is trying to make sure that we eradicate this from our system. Churches are taking steps, before couples get married, they ask them to go and run tests. Even at that, some couple will tell you, we love ourselves too much. We cannot but marry ourselves. And when the problem comes, they begin to regret. Now, is it possible for us to eradicate this from our system totally? Because I went through the net to check some countries that do not even have anything like sickle cell or malaria or that. Why do we have this kind of problem in Africa? Is it because we're a third world country, or because the information is not going round to areas where this information should go to, particularly in the rural areas?
At this present age and time, there is enough, in 21st century, we have enough information and methods of disseminating this information even to the rural areas. But there are some people who will still tell you what they want to do is what they want to do. And there's some people who are just ignorant of what is happening around them. I've seen adults who actually have gone to a stage where they want to get married. They're almost at the altar before they decide, oh, let's go check this. I met one, I've told them, before you fall in love, you see somebody and he's a human being, and you think, okay, there's a possibility at all, a remote possibility. The first thing you ask, how are you? What's your genotype? Let's confirm it before you go on. It might be on the lighter side, but it's very important, because the only way we can solve this challenge now, it's information. If we were to be maybe in the 60s and the 70s, where our parents got married, that information dissemination was minimal. It's forgivable. But at this age and time, somebody getting married maybe in 2000s going forward, and there's still this challenge, it's a problem. I have seen children who almost gave up on life. They were just upset. I've seen children who have asked their parents, well, how did this happen? Yeah, those are the psychosocial issues that come up. So to prevent such, I think there should be enough dissemination. There are some countries where naturally this challenge is not a problem. What I mean is not a problem, it's not natural out there. The only way it comes up is when, obviously, migration now. We live in a global village. People migrate. I was online some days back, and yesterday we were discussing with some people, and they were telling me that in the UK, the numbers of sickle cell sufferers are increasing. And they are African descendants, or Africans who migrated. You understand? So it's not a problem of the West per se, of Europe and America. It's a problem of West Africa, parts of the Middle East and the Caribbean. That's just where it's localized. But because of migration, it's spreading. So it's something we must tell ourselves, let's stop this. And it
hurts to know that even as at today, people don't know their genotype. People don't take it serious. I run a love program on radio, and then when you ask people their genotype, they tell you, I don't know. Some will tell you I'm AA, but go do a second test and discover that they are not AA, they are AS. Everybody wants to be AA, nobody wants to be AS. We live in we have this way of living in a state of denial. I don't know why we have that in our society today. Now, let's look at the issue of genotype, Dr. Adeyemi. Now, people know of AA, AS, and I know that there are other types of genotypes. So which is the best for marriage purpose? I know that people are watching now. You that wants to get married tomorrow, what's your genotype? Do you know? Let Dr. Adeyemi talk to you.
Okay, so for genotype, for the adult hemoglobin, there are different types of hemoglobin, right from the fetus to when it becomes an adult. So there are different types of hemoglobin. But for the normal hemoglobin is the hemoglobin A. Okay, so we have the one that's related to sickle cell disease is hemoglobin S. Yes. That is the one that has the tendency to form sickle shaped cells. Okay, so then We have other types of abnormal hemoglobin, like C, hemoglobin C, we have D, we have E, we have LEPO, we have beta thalassemia. So, so the normal hemoglobin that every normal person should have is hemoglobin A.
Okay.
So, when we talk about AS, it means that this individual has the normal A, inherited the normal A from one parent, and inherited the abnormal S from another parent. So that's why they are called AS, and otherwise known as sickle cell traits. And like he mentioned earlier on, when you have two individuals, one AS, one AS, natural selection, you cannot determine which one is going to, which child is going to come out either AA, or which one is going to come out either AS or SS. So, and the problem with these sickle cell traits, we have a high prevalence of individuals having AS. So the goal of, or the emphasis now is to encourage individuals to see how we can reduce the prevalence of these, the carrier rates of this disease. And one of the ways you can do that is by ensuring that we don't help in terms of marriages, whatever, to ensure that we don't have individuals propagating or continuing allowing the prevalence of S in our society. And that's one way we can actually curb sickle cell disease in our environment.
Okay, quickly, we have about a few minutes to go. Now let's look at the issue of transplantation. Because I know that we have a doctor who started it here in Edo, Dr. Bazwaye, Professor Bazwaye now. And some person are doubting that transplantation is not true as a cure for sickle cell. So I think both of you can share it. We have just 5 minutes to do this.
Okay. Something that is quite conclusive for management and treatment of sickle cell disease, anemia, and is transplantation. It has to do with getting a donor who has a normal hemoglobin A or AS, as case may be, and then getting a bone marrow. It must be a compatible donor and transplanting it to somebody who is SS.
Okay, compatible, that means...
It's genetically compatible. With, so it must be, the donor and recipient must be genetically compatible. And in that case, the recipient can lead a normal life and go on to live, have a normal life expectancy. And it's pioneered by, as you said, Professor Bazwaye in West Africa in some years back. It is still ongoing, something that you can key into, but the challenge there is quite expensive.
It's expensive.
Yes, this is a place the government can come in, maybe subsidize it or find a way to make the people who want to bear the cost, make it reduce for them to an extent. It's quite expensive. And if it's something to go by, not everybody can go through that process and afford it. So it's something that is quite welcome.
So it's true.
It's true.
So let me add to that. Yes, Professor Bazwaye has actually recorded huge landmark successes with respect to this technique. I think we had a bone marrow transplant meeting about 3 weeks ago, and he told us so far between 2011, I think, 2010, when he started the procedure in Benin City, Nigeria, he has transplanted about 17 persons. And usually they are all pediatric age, between as low as 7 years.
I think I saw about 12 of them. He brought them to the studio once
yes.
like that.
And these children are leading very good lives
Normal
today.
life.
They've gone back to school, they are making progress in their studies, they are meeting up with their peers in terms of competition and all that. So it's actually a welcoming procedure that we can embrace in our society. It's just the cost that is discouraging a lot of people. I know it comes with its own complications too, but it actually changes the lives of these individuals. So if parents who have the funds who can actually embrace this technique, it can actually change the outcome of their kids. And also, like my friend says here, government really has to come in. These things have to be subsidized. To establish such a center, to have it running, you need 24-hour power supply. You need, there are very expensive drugs that have to be, we don't produce in the country, we have to import. Things like determining the genetic makeup of both the donor and the recipient, we don't have such things around. So most times it even has to do some of these things outside the country, collaborations with institutions outside the country. So all these things, putting everything together, it makes the cost really very huge. And so how can you sustain such a project if there is no funds? So government can actually come in. In a civilized world, that's what's really going. Apart from there are new techniques now, disease-modifying medications, like things like hydroxyurea, some new drugs that have been produced recently, and even some drugs that are undergoing trial currently. These things have changed the way these patients are living, but transplant is still the curative means of
but it's
sickle cell
expensive.
disease. It's expensive.
Okay,
expensive.
transplant is the curative means and is expensive. So, Doctor, one last word of advice before we leave. Mr. Heath.
Yeah, partners who are intending to get married should they should take instruction from what is happening to others. They should first of all know their genotype, and if it's not
Very
something that is
important.
it's most important. If not something that is compatible, I think they should go their separate ways quietly.
Love will not be enough.
No,
when the wahala
the,
starts.
the love will become sour when it starts. Very sour.
Okay, Dr. Adeyemi.
Okay, so, well, I just want to reach out to our survivors, our warriors, sickle cell patients themselves. I interact with a lot of them daily. Even today, I was at Sickle Cell Center as part of my humanitarian services to these individuals. Actually, they're a wonderful pack of people. A lot of them may be discouraged or depressed by their condition, but I want to encourage you today that sickle cell disease is not a cause on its own. You can still achieve your goals. You can still reach out for things you actually desire in life. I know it comes with a lot of challenges, pain today, in and out of hospital and things like that. But I just want you to be hopeful and keep giving your best. And I know the sun will shine very bright for you.
Oh, amen. I have to say amen to that. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for finding time to be with us on the program. And honestly, we'd like to have those kids on the on show one of these days. So we'll talk about that after the program. All right, people, this is it. This is all we're going to do today on this issue of sickle cell. It's not something we can do just within 30 minutes. It's something that you should also help us talk about, so that if we cannot eradicate it, at least reduce it to its barest minimum, so that we can all be happy. Thank you for being there. We'll see you again on Monday. Bye-bye.